My name is Chloe. I'm 29, and just last month, I finally bought my own place. It took a full decade of relentless work, a budget that would make a monk weep, and more sacrifices than I can count. A decade of ramen, 0 vacations, and a closet that hadn't seen a new item since I was a teenager. The prize for all that discipline? A lawsuit filed by my own mother and father. No, that's not a typo. The two people who were supposed to be celebrating with me were instead trying to take me to court. The sense of betrayal was a physical ache, sharper than any blade. If you're listening to this, I'd love it if you dropped a comment to tell me where you're from, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and stay with me to hear how I went to war against the last people on earth I ever expected to be my enemies. Growing up in the Sterling household was an exercise in constant surveillance. My mother, Eleanor, was the very definition of a domineering matriarch, obsessed with public perception and social standing, and a virtuoso of emotional warfare. She could pivot from saccharine praise to Arctic silence in a heartbeat if she didn't get her way. My father, Richard, was her ideal partner in this dynamic. He hated conflict and would do anything to avoid it, which made him her primary enabler and, when necessary, her reluctant enforcer. Our home was a picture-perfect colonial in a manicured suburb, the kind of neighborhood where the state of your lawn was a competitive sport. To any outsider, we looked like a comfortable upper-middle-class family, but that flawless exterior was a mask for deep-seated financial anxiety. My parents were living far beyond their means to keep up the charade, a truth I wouldn't fully grasp for many years. Every single part of my existence was subject to their intense scrutiny. My appearance was policed, from the style of my clothes to the length of my hair. Any friends I made had to be from the right sort of families. My education was a source of constant pressure, with an unwavering expectation of flawless grades in activities that would look impressive on a college application. But their most powerful weapon was always money. I had an allowance, but it was a leash, not a privilege. The savings accounts they opened for me were in their names, making me a mere beneficiary so they could track every transaction. Any money I received for birthdays or holidays would vanish into these accounts, for my future, of course, where I had no access. Our beautiful house never felt like a home. It felt more like a pristine, well-decorated jail where I was always on edge. The tension was a palpable thing, a thickness in the air even during polite conversation. Despite their suffocating grip, I found small ways to cultivate my own independence. In high school, I landed a secret part-time job at a small bookshop, telling my parents I was at the library studying. The meager paychecks were stashed inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf. It was my first taste of real financial autonomy, earned one quiet hour at a time. When it was time for college applications, I filled out scholarship forms in secret. Their dream was for me to attend my father's expensive alma mater, no matter the mountain of debt it would put me in. I applied just to keep them happy, but I also sent applications to local state colleges that offered a path to a debt-free degree. The day I told them I was going to a state college, the fallout was catastrophic. There were floods of tears, threats of cutting me off, and then weeks of punishing silence. But this time, I didn't back down. At 18, I packed 2 suitcases, took my secret bookshop savings, and left. I found a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, Maya and Olivia, who were also escaping their own difficult family situations. Those initial months of liberation were a mix of pure terror and absolute joy. Dinner was often just a bowl of instant ramen, and I had to work a full-time job while juggling a full course load. But every choice, good or bad, was entirely my own. There was no one watching the clock when I came home or interrogating me about my spending. The apartment was tiny, with the three of us crammed into a space designed for two, yet it felt more like a true home than my parents' sprawling house ever did. It was during our second year there that the dream of owning a home started to take root. My friend Sophie had just bought a small condo and invited us over. I watched her, beaming with pride, as she showed us the walls she had painted and the furniture she had chosen. She spoke about building equity instead of just paying rent, about creating a sanctuary that was 100% hers. That evening, I went back to our little apartment and plunged into a deep dive on real estate websites. I was up until the early morning hours, browsing listings in our city, using online mortgage calculators, and trying to picture myself holding the keys to my own front door. It became my nightly obsession. I'd scroll through listings before bed, teaching myself about the local market, about what was possible. I made a vision board, not with sprawling mansions, but with photos of small, charming houses that felt achievable. I devoured every bit of information I could find on mortgages, down payments, and credit scores. I checked out books from the library, went to free seminars hosted by local banks, and absorbed knowledge like a sponge. Armed with this new information, I drafted a 10-year plan. At 20, a decade felt like a lifetime, but I broke it down into manageable steps: monthly savings targets, credit score goals, and the salary I'd need to earn to make it all happen. It was an incredibly ambitious plan, one that demanded immense discipline. But the reward at the end, total independence, was worth any sacrifice. The decade that came next was a masterclass in self-control and delayed gratification. I created a budget that was as brutal as it was effective. 50% of every single paycheck went straight into a high-yield savings account, leaving me with the absolute bare minimum for rent, bills, and food. I tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet, constantly looking for ways to cut back, and I'd feel a small thrill of victory whenever I beat my monthly savings goal, even if it was just by a few dollars. My diet was a study in extreme frugality. I bought staples in bulk, I meal prepped every single Sunday, and I got creative with instant noodles to keep from going crazy. Eating at a restaurant was a luxury reserved for my birthday once a year. Coffee shops were places I walked past, not into. I brought my lunch to my office job every day, no exceptions, politely declining when my colleagues ordered takeout. One job was never going to be enough. After my 8-hour shift as a data entry clerk, I'd rush to the office bathroom, change clothes, and head directly to a local cafe for my second job as a barista, working 4 nights a week. On weekends, I did freelance transcription work from my apartment, which saved me money on bus fare. The concept of a vacation was completely foreign to me. While my friends posted pictures from tropical beaches and European cities, I was picking up their shifts at the cafe to earn extra cash. My entire wardrobe was sourced from thrift stores, a curated collection of pieces that could be mixed and ayatched and worn for years. Instead of paying for streaming services or buying new books, the public library became my best friend. Whenever I could, I walked instead of taking the bus, telling myself the exercise was as good for my health as it was for my wallet. Despite the punishing schedule, I was strategic about my career. I worked my way up from that entry-level data entry position to a department coordinator role by being unfailingly reliable and always volunteering for extra projects. I took night classes to get my business degree, squeezing in study time during my lunch breaks and on the bus. Any extra cash I had went toward professional certifications that made me more valuable in the job market. With each job hop, I carefully negotiated my salary, always aiming for a little more. My supervisor, Miss Davis, became a crucial mentor. She saw my drive and gave me invaluable advice on how to navigate office politics and climb the corporate ladder. Throughout these grinding years, my relationship with my parents was strained, to say the least. I went to the obligatory monthly dinners, which always left me feeling emotionally exhausted. My mother, Eleanor, would make backhanded comments about me playing house and ask when I was going to get tired of this little independence game. My father, Richard, would launch into lectures about the real world and how important it was to have a safety net, a clear dig at the fact that I had none. It became more and more obvious that they were waiting for me to fail. Every promotion I got was brushed off as insignificant, a temporary fluke. They didn't see my independence as a sign of maturity. They saw it as a personal insult, a rejection of their guidance. Despite the emotional cost of these visits, I kept hitting my financial targets. Paying off my small student loan was a private celebration with my closest friends. We even printed out the final statement and ceremonially burned it. My credit score steadily climbed until it broke 800, a number that represented 1,000 small, disciplined choices. My emergency fund grew to cover 6 months of living expenses, giving me a sense of security I'd never known. And the down payment fund just kept getting bigger. Even with the tight budget, I never skipped my retirement contributions, knowing I was securing my future. I even started a small investment portfolio, teaching myself the basics from library books and free online courses. Through all the exhaustion, the ramen dinners, and the missed parties, I kept my eyes on the prize. At the start, 10 years had felt like an eternity, but once I passed the halfway point, time seemed to speed up. My spreadsheets went from being abstract projections to concrete plans, and browsing house listings turned from a fantasy into serious research. The finish line was finally in sight. After almost a decade of non-stop work, starting the actual house hunt felt completely surreal. A colleague recommended a realtor named Amanda, and I specifically chose her because she was known for respecting her clients' budgets instead of pushing them to spend more. When we first met, I showed up with a binder filled with my research, financial statements, and a list of my non-negotiables. The look of surprise and respect on her face was a validation of all those years of obsessive planning. Getting pre-approved for a mortgage came with a pleasant surprise. My excellent credit and stable job history meant I qualified for a loan that was larger than I had anticipated. But I was firm in my decision to stay well below that maximum amount. I knew that what a bank is willing to lend you isn't always what you can comfortably afford. Amanda and I made detailed lists of must-haves versus nice-to-haves. 2 bedrooms was the minimum, though 3 would be ideal. An updated kitchen was a plus, but not a deal-breaker. A good school district wasn't for me, but it was important for resale value. A reasonable commute was an absolute must. Walking into the first few open houses was an emotional overload. I felt a surge of excitement, finally taking real steps toward my goal, but it was mixed with a deep-seated anxiety about making such a huge life decision. Imposter syndrome was a constant companion. I'd stand in a living room surrounded by other potential buyers who all seemed so much more confident, more established, more deserving. I fought back those feelings by asking smart questions about the foundation, the age of the roof, and the property taxes, reminding myself of how much I had prepared for this very moment. I quickly picked up the language of house hunting: HVAC systems, load-bearing walls, escrow, amortization. I researched home insurance, learning what red flags to look for in an inspection report and what cosmetic flaws could be easily fixed later. Every house I saw was an education, helping me refine what I truly wanted. The market was even tougher than I'd expected. Even with all my preparation, I was outbid on my first 3 offers, despite offering more than the asking price. It was an emotional roller coaster. I'd get my hopes up for a property only to have them dashed a few days later. I started to wonder if I was being too picky, if I should expand my search to neighborhoods I liked less. After my 6th offer was rejected, I was deeply discouraged. I told Amanda that maybe I should just keep renting for another year and wait for the market to cool down. But she encouraged me to stay the course, reminding me that interest rates were likely to go up, which would make waiting even riskier. Her steady patience was the lifeline I needed during that frustrating time. She assured me she'd seen it all before and that the right house would come along. I kept the whole process a secret from my family, but I slipped up during one of our tense monthly dinners and revealed my plans. My mother, Eleanor, nearly spit out her wine. Tears immediately welled in her eyes as she accused me of plotting to abandon them. My father, Richard, instantly launched into his usual speech about hidden costs and maintenance expenses I surely hadn't considered. Their reaction was so extreme that even my brother, Leo, looked uncomfortable. They insisted I was on the verge of making a catastrophic mistake that would leave me financially destitute. The low point of the evening came when they offered to loan me money for the down payment, a proposition that was dripping with unspoken conditions and opportunities for control. I shut it down firmly, explaining that I had saved enough and my mind was made up. The silent, tense drive home that night only confirmed that keeping my plans to myself had been the right call. Just as I was about to give up for a while, Amanda called. A house had just come on the market that morning, and she had a gut feeling it was the one. I managed to rearrange my work schedule and met her that afternoon at a modest 2-bedroom Craftsman on a quiet tree-lined street. The house had incredible character, buried under years of neglect. There were original hardwood floors hiding beneath stained carpet and beautiful built-in shelves caked in layers of questionable paint. The inspection report showed some issues that had scared off other buyers, mainly outdated electrical wiring and a roof that was near the end of its life. But instead of a deterrent, I saw those as bargaining chips and problems I could manage with some planning. The location was perfect, just a 20-minute drive from my office and close to shops and parks. The neighborhood was clearly on the upswing. The second I stepped into the sun-drenched living room with its big windows and cozy fireplace, something just clicked. I could see past the faded wallpaper and scuffed floors. I could picture exactly how I would transform the space. This house needed work, but more than that, it needed someone who would love it for its potential. That someone was me. I told Amanda to draw up an offer that same day, and I included a personal letter to the sellers telling them how much it would mean to me to make their house my home. The negotiation was nerve-wracking. Following Amanda's advice, I offered slightly below asking, but included my letter and proof of solid financing. The hours ticked by like an eternity as we waited for their response. My phone felt glued to my hand. When Amanda finally called, she told me the sellers had received a higher offer, but they had chosen mine. They said my letter had convinced them. They wanted to sell to someone who would cherish the house, not just flip it for a profit. The inspection period was another source of anxiety. The inspector I hired was incredibly thorough, and his report confirmed the electrical and roof issues, but thankfully, he found no major structural problems. We used those items to negotiate, and the sellers agreed to a price reduction that would cover about half of the repair costs. The appraisal was the next hurdle. If the house appraised for less than my offer, I'd have to come up with the difference in cash. The wait was agonizing, but it ended in relief when the appraisal came in at exactly the purchase price. Then came the mountain of paperwork for the mortgage. All my years of meticulous record-keeping paid off. I provided years of tax returns, bank statements, and pay stubs. Every time my loan officer asked for another document, my anxiety spiked, but he assured me it was all standard procedure. The underwriting process dragged on, testing my sanity. Unexpected closing costs and insurance quotes popped up, forcing me to adjust my budget. But my emergency fund was there to absorb the shocks. When closing day finally arrived, I took the day off work. I was too nervous to concentrate on anything else. At the title company, I signed what felt like a mountain of paper until my hand ached. Every signature was a symbol of a decade of sacrifice. When the last page was signed, Amanda handed me the keys on a little keychain she'd had custom made with my new address. Walking through the empty house by myself, as the legal owner, was an indescribable feeling. I went from room to room, touching the walls that were now mine, listening to the house's unique creaks and groans. I sat on the floor in the middle of the living room and just cried, tears of pure joy and relief, letting go of 10 years of pent-up stress. That first night, I celebrated with Chinese takeout, eating it on the kitchen counter, and then slept on an air mattress in the empty bedroom. Despite the bare walls and the echo, I fell asleep with a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. This house wasn't just an asset, it was a victory. I was selective about who I told. I invited my close friends over for a low-key housewarming. My brother Leo showed up with a toolbox as a gift. His congratulations felt genuine, but he also gave me a subtle warning about how our parents might react. He'd always been better at managing their moods than I was. His gift came with an offer to help with any projects, a small but meaningful olive branch. My co-workers surprised me with a celebratory lunch and a gift card to a home improvement store. Ms. Davis pulled me aside and told me how much she admired my determination. After some thought, I posted a simple announcement on social media, just a photo of my new keys with a short caption about reaching my 10-year goal. I was careful not to show the house or give the address. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The most telling reaction was the 2 weeks of silence from my parents after I told them on the phone that the sale was complete. I started on small projects, stripping the dated wallpaper in the dining room and testing out paint colors. Each small change made the house feel more like mine. But that illusion of peace was shattered when a courier delivered a thick, official-looking envelope. I was standing in my kitchen covered in paint when I tore it open. Inside were court summons, with my parents, Eleanor and Richard Sterling, listed as the plaintiffs. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, but as I read the legal claims, a wave of nausea washed over me, and I started shaking uncontrollably. I collapsed onto the used couch I had just bought, gasping for air as the full weight of their betrayal crushed me. My hands were trembling as I called Leo. He confirmed it. Our parents were suing me. He'd heard them mention it, but had assumed it was just another one of their empty threats. But it was real, it was calculated, and it was designed to ruin the proudest moment of my life. The lawsuit laid out 4 claims, each one more absurd than the last. First, they alleged I owed them $162,000 for the cost of raising me, complete with itemized charges for food, clothes, and even my childhood birthday parties. Second, they claimed that several family heirlooms I had, including my grandmother's jewelry, were stolen, not gifted. Third, they fabricated a story about giving me undocumented loans throughout my 20s, which they now demanded be repaid with interest. That one hurt the most, because I had been so careful to never take a dime from them. Finally, and most appallingly, they asserted that they were entitled to partial ownership of my house because of their investment in my upbringing, and they were requesting a lien be placed on my property. The court date was just 4 weeks away. The house that was meant to be my sanctuary, my symbol of freedom, now felt contaminated. That night, I locked and double-checked every window and door, overcome by an irrational fear that they would try to physically invade the space they were already attacking with lawyers. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotional chaos. I swung wildly between shock, anger, and a deep, bottomless grief. I couldn't sleep. I'd pace through the quiet rooms of my new house at night. The same rooms that had felt so welcoming now felt haunted by my parents' betrayal. I'd jolt awake at the slightest sound, convinced someone was breaking in. I started having panic attacks, triggered by the sound of the mail truck or the ringing of my phone. I lost my appetite completely. I had to call in sick from work for a full week, the first time in my entire career. The home improvement project sat half-finished, a constant reminder of my stolen joy. My support system immediately mobilized. Maya took a few days off work and stayed with me, sleeping on the air mattress and making sure I ate. She handled calls from concerned friends and managed all the practical things I couldn't deal with. Sophie spent her evenings researching family law attorneys, creating a detailed spreadsheet with their specialties, success rates, and fees. Her logical, analytical approach was a lifeline when my own mind was too clouded with emotion to think straight. Olivia declared herself my personal chef, showing up with containers of homemade food. She'd just sit with me while I ate, telling me light-hearted stories about her day, giving me a much-needed distraction. At work, Ms. Davis quietly arranged for me to have flexible hours to accommodate my legal appointments. She protected me from office stress, reassigning demanding projects and making sure I knew my job was secure. Leo became a surprising and crucial ally. Because he was still the golden child, he had access to their conversations, and he started feeding me information, risking his own relationship with them. He felt guilty for not warning me sooner and was now determined to help me fight. An online forum for first-time homeowners I had joined also became an incredible resource. A few members had gone through similar legal battles with family and offered both emotional support and practical advice. With Sophie's research, I found Jessica, an attorney who specialized in exactly these kinds of parental claim cases. Our first meeting gave me a flicker of hope. She told me that legally, my parents' case was incredibly weak. Parents can't retroactively bill their adult children for the cost of raising them. Gifts, once given, can't be legally reclaimed without a written loan agreement, and their claim to my house had zero legal basis. Despite the strong legal position, Jessica warned me that my parents' main weapon would be emotional manipulation in the courtroom. We worked on strategies to help me keep my composure. I started documenting everything, creating a timeline and gathering evidence. I spent days organizing my financial records, proving that every penny for the house came from my own savings. For the stolen heirlooms, I found old birthday cards and emails where they explicitly called them gifts. I put together a file showing my complete financial independence since the day I turned 18. As we prepared, Leo dropped another bombshell. He told me the real reason for the lawsuit. Our parents were in a massive financial hole. My father, Richard, had developed a serious gambling problem, and my mother, Eleanor, had maxed out multiple credit cards with her shopping addiction. Their grand plan had been for me to support them in their retirement. They had apparently intended to move in with me, a temporary situation that would have become permanent. My house purchase sent them into a panic. The lawsuit was their twisted way of punishing me for my independence and a desperate attempt to get their hands on my assets. Leo also revealed they had pulled similar stunts with other relatives in the past. This wasn't a one-time act of desperation. It was a pattern. The knowledge was painful, but it also gave me a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't about love or family obligation. It was about control and greed. Armed with that truth and Jessica's expertise, I started to feel a sliver of confidence. Their weapons were lies. Mine would be the truth. As the court date neared, our preparations became almost military grade. Jessica ran me through mock trials, playing the part of the opposing counsel and hitting me with the most inflammatory questions she could think of to test my composure. We practiced until I could respond calmly, no matter how much my insides were churning. Choosing my outfit was a strategic move. I picked a conservative, professional pantsuit that projected confidence. We organized all the evidence into indexed binders, one for each of their claims, so we could instantly pull up any document we needed. The night before the hearing, my friends came over. They brought comfort food and board games, determined to keep my mind off the next day. We sat around my dining room table, and they shared stories of their own family struggles, which made me feel less alone. The morning of the hearing, I went for a long run to burn off my nervous energy. Leo met me at the courthouse, a gesture of solidarity that meant the world to me. Seeing my parents in the waiting area was a shock to my system. Eleanor was dressed to look frail and victimized. Richard sat beside her, staring straight ahead, his posture rigid with self-righteous anger. Their lawyer tried to intimidate us with a blustery introduction, but Jessica shut him down with cool professionalism. When our case was called, we entered the courtroom. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Miller, had a no-nonsense air about her. She looked at the documents with a skeptical expression, which Jessica later told me was a very good sign. My parents' lawyer put on a dramatic performance, speaking of family duty and ungrateful children. When it was Jessica's turn, the contrast was stark. She calmly and methodically dismantled each of their claims with facts and legal precedent. She presented the birthday cards proving the heirlooms were gifts. She showed the bank statements, a decade's worth, proving every dollar for the house was mine. The timeline we built demonstrated a clear and long-standing financial separation. As our evidence mounted, Judge Miller's questions for my parents and their lawyer became sharper. The turning point came during cross-examination. Under Jessica's precise questioning, my father lost his temper and blurted out an admission about his recent gambling losses. That opened the floodgates. My mother, trying to salvage the situation, admitted they had always expected to live with me, and that my buying a house without their permission was a betrayal. Even their own lawyer looked shocked. Judge Miller's decision was swift and harsh. She dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning they could never file the same suit again. And in a move that underscored her view of the lawsuit's malicious nature, she ordered them to pay all of my legal fees. In the hallway afterward, my parents tried to confront me, but I was ready. I delivered the short, firm statement Jessica and I had prepared about needing to establish permanent boundaries. I told them their actions had destroyed any chance of a future relationship. Then, with Leo by my side, I turned and walked away, not looking back as their shouts faded behind me. In the car, the full emotional weight of the day hit me, and I finally let myself break down, crying with relief, anger, and a profound sense of loss. The victory in court brought a wave of conflicting emotions. I was immensely relieved, but also grieving the family I wished I'd had. I took a real vacation from work, my first in over 10 years. I spent the days processing everything, reclaiming my house as a sanctuary. I smudged every room with sage, a symbolic cleansing of all the negative energy. I rearranged the furniture. I started the projects again. Leo and I had long, honest conversations, and for the first time, we began to build a real sibling relationship, one based on mutual respect, not shared trauma. I started therapy with a specialist in family trauma, Dr. Evans, who helped me untangle the web of manipulation that had defined my life. The home improvement projects became a form of therapy. Every wall I painted, every garden bed I planted, was an act of reclaiming my independence. I set up firm boundaries with my extended family, sending out carefully worded emails, explaining my decision to distance myself from my parents. My chosen family, Maya, Olivia, and Sophie, rallied around me, our friendship deepening into something unbreakable. I got involved in a community garden, and the simple act of growing things alongside my neighbors gave me a sense of belonging I'd never known. As the one-year anniversary of buying my house approached, I finally threw the housewarming party I'd always wanted. The house was transformed. It was filled with light, color, and laughter. The lawsuit, which was meant to destroy me, had ultimately liberated me. It had been the brutal, necessary catalyst to sever toxic ties and force me to build a life on my own terms. That experience taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up with love and respect. It's about who supports your dreams, not who tries to sabotage them. My house keys, which once just symbolized a financial achievement, now represent something more: resilience, self-trust, and the courage to build your own foundation, no matter who tries to tear it down. I wonder what boundaries you've had to set in your own life to protect your peace. If any part of my story connected with you, I'd be grateful if you left a comment sharing your own experiences. Please consider subscribing for more stories about navigating life's challenges and finding your own strength. Thank you for listening to my journey. I wish you all the best in building your own foundations, the kind that can weather any storm.